Hi, my name is Mark Bernat, and I'm a monetary economist. In this video, I want to talk about Russia's economic gameplay and how it ends. And we're talking about geopolitical gameplay. So here I have constructed a very simple game construct model. And this is based on, like I've said in my previous videos, old school gaming. And when I apply game systems and game tools to a geopolitical event of this nature, I'm not taking away the seriousness of it. Rather, I'm constructing a conceptual framework in which you can interpret, analyze, and subsequently hang facts and data. Again, this is not a, time series autoregression vector model. Rather, it's a back-of-the-envelope calculation, but it's on time-tested game systems that seem to replicate with accuracy historical outcomes. And this system is really based on a production chart, a production cost and time chart of various units the Russians can apply to the front line compared to the attrition rate, the attrit rate. And this is based on 2 years of averages of how they attrit men and material. And I really should put some numbers like, is this brigade size, battalion size, but let's just abstract away from the details right now. That could be a subsequent video. And maybe sometime I will create a game, again, not taking away the seriousness of this event. Rather, the game's purpose is to create a simulation that would project accurately or with some accuracy the events of the geopolitical timeline. So what Russia does is they've got basically, you count these are industrial units or hexes. I think in terms of hexes because that's how the old game systems worked. You can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Based on the amount of the industrial military ability to bring forward and produce units, I've ascribed 8 production hexes to Russia. Now, I also include 2 from China and North Korea. Those aren't direct production hexes, but they, on a marginal basis, remember marginal, it finishes the product. They contribute about 2. And I put Iran in other, and other you can include maybe over here a little bit of India or Turkey's contribution as 1. So that means in a 6-month time horizon, they'll have 11 production revenue or production hexes contributing to what they can produce for the front lines. And if you look, here's an infantry. This is a symbol of an infantry. This is a symbol of a mechanized air. And that could be SAC, Strategic Air Command, or, fighter. This is a drone unit, artillery. It could be shells or the actual artillery unit. That's a fortification. Granted, there's a lot of other things missing here, but I had to go forward with this for the simplification, and it has pretty much the same result. So again, if you apply the production capacity of the total of the access powers, we'll call it access powers for the sake of this game, to the production, and you have 6, 12, 48-month time horizons. Most are 6. So to create an infantry unit, if Russia wanted to shoot the moon, they could produce 5 infantry units in a given 6-month time horizon. Now, infantry are more or less garrison units just holding the line, not very effective in pushing anything forward. But if you notice over here in a 6-month attrit rate, they probably attrit 6 units. And so that means every 6 months they're going to be decreasing a little bit on the front lines and hollowed out. Now, and I think that is manifest in they were creating this grand army. Everybody's talking about the grand army, the great offensive, the 1 million men. And, that grand army panned out to be 50, maybe 80,000. So this comes in line with the data. Again, I could create a lot of charts to support this. And it's a back-of-the-envelope calculation of production versus attrit rate. So even if they shoot the moon and they're not doing anything else, then they're still attritting a 6-month 1 unit every month if they just put everything into infantry. Now you say, if that's true, they would lose everything at a much faster depreciation rate attrition rate. Well, the key is, and here's the important point, they're using Soviet stockpiles from the Union, the Soviet Union. This is not their stockpiles. This was things that they had massed in their war chest. And so they have the ability to maintain, at least to some extent, this war chest from the Union that they've accumulated in warehouses, and some production capacity is going into just refurbishing and upgrading old units, or just slam, the way the Soviets, the Russians think, they just slam on some, very primitive armor in the front of something and call it a tank. But, and for this mechanized, I would include that as really mechanized on armor, but it could be mechanized. And that's what you need for offensive capability. Again, infantry is just garrison. So this stockpile of Soviet Union is basically hollowed out or depleted. They don't have much left. So they can continue to contribute a little bit. Air, every single time they lose air, then the production cost is very high and the timeline is very long. They will not be able to create new SACs, Strategic Air Command units, in any reasonable time frame. And that's good news for Ukraine, because every single time they take it out in Crimea, which is Ukrainian, then that's his units that they cannot replace. Drone units and artillery, we can say, are disposable, so they continuously have to be upgrading that. They're getting this, again, maybe from North Korea, and drone units, components from China, and that's why I've contributed 2 industrial hexes to this whole production timeline. But the artillery will not be able to be replenished that rapidly, because they're going to have to be taking it from the production of mech units or infantry units. And artillery is really the bread and butter of the Russian mentality. And I know this because the Russian mentality, I have a little bit of that in my strategic thinking when I'm doing gameplay, is I just create fortifications and, things of just one singular unit that will just, through brute force, brute strength, wear the enemy down. And it's a relatively low cost and, effective time production cost. Now, artillery in and of itself has like zero defense capability. It's not like you need infantry as a garrison to hold the line because they have defensive capability. You just can't stick artillery in a fortification. So that has to be taken in mind when you couple it with this. Now, Ukraine on the front line is probably, in my opinion, and again, it's fog of war, they'll probably just do an end run. They probably won't go through the center and hit these fortifications. So, unfortunately, they just have to grunt and bear it for a little bit. And it is very unfortunate. It breaks my heart. But let's keep on going. So if we look at the attrit rate of this, and you see that artillery attrits pretty fast because they're using up these disposable shells, then Russia, the bottom line is Russia does not have the industrial capacity to maintain this geopolitical event much longer. They're hollowed out. I mean, one day we'll wake up and it's like straw that breaks the camel's back. It's just like one day it's like in the Matrix, you'll just be able to push the Phantom down and there'll be nothing inside, just like a paper mache, unit in Russia, because there's nothing left. And this is clearly, I'm an economist, it's clearly manifest in, if you compare their production capacity, their choices in production costs and timeline against their attrit rate. And again, this is based on ceteris paribus. Ceteris paribus, because there could be geopolitical events, but, even it could go either way with that. Geopolitical events external in the West. Europe, hats off to Europe. They are showing consistent, stepped up support. The United States probably will come through consistently, but, that's a question mark, but it could go either way. They could come through even greater. So I'm assuming ceteris paribus. But the main thing here is the pressure on the front line, even without additional much aid coming from the U.S., but aid from the U.S. probably will come, just European aid will still be able to achieve this attrit rate of Russian forces. And so if you look at the coup d'etat collapse of Russian lines time frame, June 2024 is still a little premature. It could happen. You never know, because like I said, Ukraine strikes when they're not looking, and that's might happen. But I think more likely they'll be continuing this hollowing out and attrition because the attrit rate for Russia is significantly more than Ukraine. Ultimately, what matters, is production capacity in economic war, because raw garrisons and infantry are becoming less, hopefully, a factor as things like drones and other, mechanized robotic type units are applied to the field. Already January 2025, maybe this is a pretty conservative a coup d'etat, once this pressure builds. I have it at 20%, but that might be too conservative. It could be higher. June 2025, 40%. It's almost like 50-50 by next year. But again, this is conservative. It could go higher. And January, it looks like it's going to start going. And then June 2026, yeah. December 2026, it kind of is a symbolic event because of the collapse of the Soviet Union. 2026, the 26th of December, it's pretty much, I think that's pretty much a given. And you guys can quote me on that and call me out on that. Now, if you think this game system is missing elements, or I've been too generous or not generous enough to Russia, or there's other industrial components, or the cost is off for this units, this have been calculated on production cost tables, which I've seen in other gameplays. And again, the games are pretty accurate with historical outcomes. Unfortunately, we have to wait for the fate to unfold, and that's at a cost. But the reality is, at any point, at any juncture on this timeline here, as we move forward through this, it could become reality. So it's a very hopeful message. And again, it's a serious event and a heartbreaking event. But the objective here is to make sure that Ukraine just doesn't win, but Russia loses. Because we want the liberation of Russia, the genuine liberation of Russia, and that would make the world a better place. Can you imagine if this was fragmented into city-states and free movement of labor and capital, peaceful, transparent democracies? And these countries are very cognizant of environmental and humanitarian, events and awareness around the world. This whole world, this largest geopolitical country the whole world would become on another production possibilities curve. It would be like an outward shift in the comparative advantage of having a friendly state occupying this much landmass is unthinkable. It would be the next revolution in humanity. So although it's a serious event and it's a tragic event, it has a silver lining, and that is just waiting for this history to unfold. And, you don't have to be a spectator. You can contribute to that, even if it's humanitarian causes to Ukraine, something like bandages, something like for children, something to really help, so they can, if it's humanitarian, they can displace the cost and maybe put some more into these, mechanized or robotic drone type things that can help hollow out and target these industrial centers. I mean, even these industrial centers, you hit enough of these, you hit enough refineries, you take 1 or 2 or 3 of these offline. And when that happens, the production cost, that they have less, if they only go from 11 to say, 8, that means the amount that they can bring to bear on the front line is even less. So this whole timeline is accelerated. You could be at 80% by next year. And it's very hard to predict the future. There's no crystal balls, and anybody that can say they can, I question that claim. But really, think about it. The knocking the refineries offline, you get enough of those, you're knocking the production hex off, and the attrit rate stays the same. So this is very good news. And, I decided to do this video because I wanted to put a conceptual framework onto this so people are not just talking and speculating. And, there's a lot of talking heads that are just making claims, which are all good, but I wanted to add some numbers here and data, and you can, again, agree or disagree, and we can adjust some of this data and some of this timeline accordingly. I might make subsequent videos that will expand out or drill down to some of the details, or even create a game. I mean, there's a lot of game makers. I do some coding, And the game would be, again, with all the seriousness of this event, not like a game of amusement, but a game of analysis. So my name is Mark Biernat. Thank you very much. My name is Mark Biernat. I'm a monetary economist, and I'm applying game theory and ideas which I learned in my economic studies and research to the geopolitical event of how the Russian geopolitical event will end, and it will end in a positive way, and it's coming around the corner. Thank you very much. Have a great day. Thank you.